Serious, married couples, what is the one thing you regret most about your wedding? We wanted a tiny wedding, immediate family and close friends only. My mom invited her siblings and my spouse's deceased father's siblings. We were too polite to uninvite them. So the group was lopsided enough that the toasts were 80% about my spouse. My boss, who didn't know me that well, noticed the disparity and made a toast about me. The whole thing ended up looking like it was my spouse's wedding, and I'd been invited to attend. Still had an awesome time, though. Buying the suit I wore, as a groom I rented and nothing fit right. All of my pictures showed. As much as my wife spent on her dress, I could have spent the $500 to buy the perfect fitting suit. Really short-sighted on my part. My stepsister got engaged at my wedding reception, and I didn't punch her or her fiance for it later. Apparently the two of them arranged the whole thing together, that he would pop the question halfway through the daddy-daughter dance. Their marriage lasted all of 2 years, as well. Inviting a certain family member. My mother died a few weeks before the wedding. We'd moved it as close as we could, and with the stress of her being ill I couldn't cope with my grandmother moaning that we hadn't invited these family members. Well, they showed up, after handing the RSVP to me at my mother's funeral while they were loading the coffin into the hearse. They ate food from everyone else's plates, sit-down dinner, and they minneswept the food of people they'd never met before. Took and ate an entire tear of wedding cake and then kept getting the DJ to play naff love songs dedicated to each other rather than the playlist we'd requested. It wasn't the worst behavior I'd ever seen from them at a wedding, but it was definitely the worst behavior at my wedding. Focusing way too much on small details. Nobody cares what color the napkins are. It was my wedding and I don't remember what ducking color they were. Get napkins. Move on. No need to stress about that stuff. We had a groom's cake. It was in the shape of a SNES. It was all kinds of chocolate. It was very delicious at the tasting. It was gone before I was able to get a piece, even though the damn thing was named after me. Duck all of you bastards for eating my cake. My birthday is Halloween and our wedding date is mid-November. We went to Vegas and stayed at the Mandalay Bay Hotel for my Halloween birthday and blow off some pre-wedding steam. We got way too drunk and ending up getting married early. We got married at the Mandalay Bay Hotel and got free tickets to the Shark Tank there. There is a picture of us, completed wasted, in a Halloween costume, holding up our marriage certificate with a shark behind us. Cost $150. We vow to never tell a soul. That picture and our real marriage certificate is hidden in a picture frame behind our fake certificate and picture. Our November wedding was a mess. People were getting drunk, making remarks about how I was going to get laid that night. My mother-in-law was my mother-in-law and embarrassed the hell out of us. My nephew was barely a year old and walking like a drunk. We were pulled apart from each other the whole day. Half of those dingbats left after we served cake. One woman was digging for gold in her nose when we said our vows. Cost $5,000 plus. You don't have to go out all 9 yards for these people. It is your day. Remember it. If you want to get drunk, get married in Mandalay Bay and see some sharks. You do you. Who cares if your great aunt Kathy wants a family event with everyone with rose gold colors? Great aunt Kathy isn't getting married. You are. If you want sharks, go get sharks. I've read online that this is a pretty common problem. If you have a unity candle, light the wick before the actual ceremony. My wife and I awkwardly tried to light ours for like 3 minutes while her family member was singing a song. We eventually just tilted our individual lit candles until they were leaning on each other and making one flame out of the 2 wicks. The crowd cheered. Letting my mother steamroller about too much stuff. The main one, though, was when she told us that if we spent more than 15 minutes having photos taken, our guests would get bored waiting. So we literally had 15 minutes for photos after the ceremony. We'd been married for 4 years and I could still kick myself for listening to her about that. Allowing my sister-in-law to be a bridesmaid. She shouted at me and made me cry as I was putting my dress on. My mother. She ruined it. Both my husband and I hated our wedding because she took over and did everything and then acted like she was doing us a wonderful favor. We didn't get to choose anything or do anything for it. I completely regret not putting my foot down and doing what I wanted. My dad gave me away at my first very small wedding, which meant the world to me. After much physical and emotional abuse, that marriage ended. I eloped to the courthouse for the second since everyone lived far away, and I had 3 children from my first marriage that needed to be provided for more than I needed a wedding. The gifted bouquet was fabulous. I was marrying my best friend. My children were in attendance and they gave their full approval. It really was great. My only regret is I never got to have a wedding dance with my dad. The dance was the only part I dreamed about as a little girl because my dad would dance me around the house while I stood on his feet. We'd waltz like you'd see in movies when people got married, and I wanted that with my dad. I wouldn't have stood on his feet, of course. Next time I go home I'm standing that old man up and we're gonna waltz. Damn it. Just like we used to. I'll go Goodwill a wedding dress if I'm feeling sassy about it. Not banning cell phones from the ceremony. I only had 30 guests, but every pic of us at the altar has a cell phone in the air. I paid for professional pictures. I will send you some if you ask. Don't ruin all my pics with your stupid iPhone. We got married in Hawaii with a very small group of friends and family. The wedding itself was marvelously low-key. Very sweet and perfect for us. We just stuck around in Hawaii for the honeymoon. But my family was still there. I do wish that my husband and I had a little more time just to ourselves. But we're saving up for a 2 of us trip soon. So it's all going to work out. I think doing the service on the Riverwalk instead of in the chapel would have been much prettier. Especially in the pictures. It seemed chilly, though. So we did the service indoors. I really regret that decision and think I'll have to marry her again and do it right this time. We had a pretty small wedding. Less than 50 guests. Just family and very close friends, and didn't go crayon spending. The only regret I have is that I did not eat more at the reception, and barely got any of my cake. By the time we got to the hotel that night we were both starving. About the wedding, not a damn thing. My husband's mom kept trying to push me into having a big wedding in a fancy venue with hundreds of people, and just the thought of it was stressing me out until I said, "Duck it." I ended up having a tiny ceremony in a friend's backyard. We had a potluck dinner, lots of beer, only like 25 people were there. It was perfect. The honeymoon. However, on our way to Florida, a big chunk of scrap metal flew off a semi-truck in front of us and went under the car. It tore up the transmission, the oil pan, the axle. The whole underside of the car was shredded. We ended up having to change half our plans. Spent tons of money on car repairs and rental cars, and it was an unmitigated disaster, so that I would change. I was nervous and had no appetite. So much beautiful food wasted. Smashing the cake in my wife's face. Some frosting ended up in her eye, irritating it rather bad for the rest of the night. Should have just let her do the smooshing to me, or at least not have gone in like I was trying to annihilate her face. I wish we had just eloped and did it in Vegas. Both my parents and my mill acted like asses. We had a very small wedding and the reception at my parents' house, but my mom insisted on putting the food in the basement. I still have no idea why, and my mill was hysterical because she had to drive our car to her hotel. It was 8 miles away. We are about to celebrate our 21st anniversary. He didn't put a sign out that said no cell phones during the ceremony when I was walking down the aisle. People had their phones out in front of my father and I. I didn't see my husband's face until my father gave me away. Really sad about it because look at this guy. Getting a great photographer was a fantastic decision. That we chose December in Iowa to have it. Turned out there was a blizzard and 50% of the people couldn't make it. I didn't realize I was wearing my hair ties on my wrists until the pictures came back. To save money, we had friends do everything. The string quartet, the flowers, the officiant, the videography and photography. Everything was awesome. Except the photography. He was my friend's dad, a successful dermatologist and amateur photographer. Anyhow, this was the early days of Photoshop and a hard drive crash wiped him out. I'm not mad 15 years later, but he was so embarrassed. He never spoke with me again. The original venue we picked was destroyed by a hurricane a few days before the wedding was supposed to happen. 5 years later we haven't gotten any of that money back. So yeah, I regret choosing them pretty bad. Allowing my husband to bully me into having his ex-girlfriend as a bridesmaid. They had 6 within 2 weeks after the wedding. He is an ex-husband now and she is on her 4th husband. We didn't have our personal effects packed up after the wedding. So instead of dashing off to the hotel, we sat in the car for an hour waiting for the bridesmaids and groomsmen to find all of our stuff. 0/10. Would never recommend. We got some letter blocks, beads, and pipe cleaners so people could put their name on their glass stemware if they wanted to. Then we forgot about it and they didn't get used. From time to time I see the bags of letters and think we should have a drunken party. 1. Not hitting my weight loss goal. 2. Since my wife and I got married on the cheap, we tried to invite as few people as possible. Looking back, I wish we had invited a few other extended family members. Receiving line. We put my mother-in-law in charge of everything because we were getting married in my husband's hometown. But we were in school in a different state. She wanted a receiving line and we didn't fight her on it. Turns out she invited the entire city. We didn't get to eat the catered food. Didn't get to dance. Didn't even get to cut our cake. They started serving and eating our cake because we were stuck in the foyer of the reception hall shaking hands with hundreds of people we didn't know and would never meet again. I cannot stress enough. Just don't do a receiving line. Edit. A word. If it's a decent sized wedding, it's very hard to spend enough time with your valued guests. Make sure to at least say something to convey your heartfelt appreciation of them for enjoying that special day with you, especially if any of them traveled to attend. I can't think of anything that I regret. We went on a vacation to a city we love and got married in their courthouse while we were there. Nobody was staring at me and I didn't have to spend $1 million. Afterwards we went to the beach and flew kites. Apparently there was delicious food. I should have tried some of the food. Instead I was drunk on adrenaline. I was so happy with everything. You can't believe it. Next day I was exhausted. So worth it. Having a ceremony. My mill invited so many people that my so and I had never met and have never seen again, and my Phil did a surprise champagne toast that caused the amount of the wedding to go up because he wanted to be the center of attention. It also caused family drama on my side since I didn't want to invite my cousin and her ill-behaved children who everyone called scum, but then shame on me for not wanting them there. Having a wedding taught me that, despite everyone telling you it's about you, it's not about you. If we ever had to do it again, we'd just go to the courthouse and call it done. I was pregnant, but just enough to look fat. I really wish we'd waited until after we had her. Oh well, going on 10 years now. Having a traditional wedding, we should have just taken the immediate family and gone on a nice trip somewhere. Instead my parents paid for catering for 11 people who RSVP'd, but then decided they would rather go to a monster truck rally and a bunch of people left early to watch basketball. Feeling like we had to appease the moms with a pastor and some Bible readings. Seriously, almost want to get married again just to have a Lord of the Rings or Walking Dead themed wedding. Much more us. I planned our wedding in Boston from Atlanta, so I relied heavily on recommendations from friends, etc. for vendors. The one thing I regret was finding the photographer online versus getting a recommendation. 95% of our photos were pretty awful and took about 6 months to get because the photographer was going through major life-altering events you wouldn't understand. So yeah, my husband still grumbles about it to this day, 9 years later, but I see his point. I forgot about how we would get back to our hotel after the wedding. Completely slipped my mind, so we had to get a lift with a few family friends. Only regret in an absolutely amazing day. 2 things. I got married in a hotel. The stereo that was to play our aisle music was quiet. I didn't realize how quiet until my wife walked down the aisle to near silence. I could have called her to ask to bring our louder stereo, but I was too paranoid about it being bad luck to see or speak to each other on the morning of the wedding. The second was that the hotel provided a lovely chocolate fountain. I forgot we had it until the day after, so didn't even try it. 2 very minor issues that didn't really spoil the perfect day. Wish I would have checked the calendar before scheduling it. Did not realize it was ahead of a 3-day weekend. Could have planned a trip to Vegas or something. My wife regrets not getting a videographer to capture some of the moments. And I regret trying to pull off a gag when I did the garter throw. It took too long and she got kind of embarrassed by it. Not getting around to all of the tables. There were 2 tables we missed BC my so didn't want to go around during dinner. Still feel bad about it. Also, I wish we had dimmed the lights more during dancing. We didn't get up lighting so they left the lights somewhat high and I feel like people didn't dance as much because they felt like everyone was watching. I wish we would have given ourselves a bigger photography budget. I also wish I would have followed my heart and gone with a way cooler, less traditional dress. Honestly, I don't really have any regrets. The wife and I got married by the German equivalent of a justice of the peace. One of her 4 sisters was there while her mom got the food ready for a small gathering of her family for after. 2 of my fellow soldiers were there as well. One standing as my best man and the other nominally as my translator, which I didn't really need, but was a requirement. It was a quick, easy ceremony that was about as low stress as you could get. My bride even wore a dark blue pantsuit that another sister lent her because she hates dresses and didn't want to waste money on a new outfit. All in all, I guess it was kind of lame, but we've been married for 27 years now, so I guess that worked out alright. There are a few things I would change. I would have put more work into the seating chart. My wife has a larger family than me so she has 8 guests for every one of mine. And the tables were very lopsided people wise. The DJs told us if there were any specific requests to tell them. I immediately said no imka, no electric slide, no cha-cha slide, no forced group dancing. I hate that it. All 3 got played. I specifically asked people not to bring kids. And my cousin brought his 2 terrorists. The photographer was it. There are virtually no pictures of me and my bride during the reception, but tons of my cousin's kids. I paid for pictures of my wedding assuming I'd be in at least some. The fact that my parents cancelled their lifetime goal of a trip to Scotland to be there. They didn't tell us until afterwards and we felt so guilty. The worst part? Shortly after that my mom was diagnosed with Parkinson's. It has progressed very quickly and now they will never be able to go. We eloped in Hawaii. An unlimited amount of people were able to watch through a webcam and I still get compliments on it. Many years later, it also saved us a ton of money, headaches and arguments. This came after 2 months of planning a real wedding and saying duck it, there's gotta be a better way. I think I would have done my hair a little different, and I wouldn't have vetoed the Hawaiian shirt he wanted instead of the button up we went with. That's about it. My regret is not taking the time out to enjoy myself. Both my wife and I spent a lot of time going around and talking to people, making sure we got through everyone and not missing anyone out, and doing things to make sure everyone felt included. Since then, we've found out that everyone was super happy and we didn't need to spend that time seemingly appeasing everybody. We both regret not taking a bit of time out and just enjoying ourselves with our immediate friends. We're desperate to go to another wedding at the same venue as guests, so we can get the experience we created for ours. Let the photographer be too much of a dictator. She did a great job on the photos, but would have been better to limit her influence more. She kind of treated the whole thing like a professional photo shoot, but we were there to party. Not saying I'd eliminate it, just strive for better balance. I fell walking down the aisle, twice. Not buying the copyright to the wedding photos. Our wedding was fairly memorable and a good time, but that part bugs me. I let my idiot friends take me out and get me over the top drunk the night before. I was so hungover for the wedding I didn't enjoy it. Would definitely not do it that way again. I got married inside of a Mormon temple. Now that I don't believe in Mormonism anymore, it breaks my heart to think about how only a handful of people got to actually see me get married. And most of our family was excluded because of rules that the church has about who can go into the temple. I wrote a song for my wife, but the band screwed up and played it at far too slow a tempo. I was too exhausted by that point in the wedding. It was past midnight to correct them, so I ended up dropping it after struggling through about 2/3 of it. I sang it to her in private later, but I'll always regret not standing up and telling them to play faster. That I didn't spend more time enjoying it. It seemed like the whole day was about everyone else celebrating. From the second the ceremony ended it was just so much noise and chaos. First it was the pictures in the church with every possible combination you could think of as to not offend anyone. Then it was rush off somewhere else for a few photos that we actually wanted. Then it was rush to the reception. Hungry and want to eat? Too bad. There are tons of people here to see you. Scarf down something small really quick and then do the introductions and stuff. Food comes out. Better try to eat it fast because you've got a lot of people to talk to. But you better not spend too much time catching up with one group of people because it will offend someone else. Try to grab a drink from the bar. Maybe you can get a quick sip in but everyone wants to just borrow you for a second. And then more pictures. Then the cake photos and the first dance. And then more talking. Finally this day that has gone on for what seems like forever is over. At this point you're not even down to have relations. You just want to sleep. The whole day was like a chore. And for someone that doesn't like being the center of attention, large groups of people, public speaking or dancing, it was rough. That said, I love my wife and if I had to do it again I would. Not being more serious with my meal. She didn't take my timeline seriously and let everyone get food before my wife and I finished taking pictures. By the time we got done the food was all gone. It was cold and the plates we had made for us weren't very good. Because everyone was done eating. The first dance was awkward and us entering the area had no real meaning. It really annoyed me. The ceremony was perfect. And my wife looked beautiful and that's all I really wanted. Picture it. A wedding between a white guy and a Peruvian girl. The incredibly white bread father of the groom reads a speech in English. Then, rather than turning the mic over to the bride's father so that he can address her party in Spanish, the groom's father reads a god-awful Google translation of his entire speech in heavily accented Spanish while the bride's father awkwardly stands there in silence for several minutes. It was painful. People were visibly cringing. Do not let your overbearing parents take over. Do not. Hiring a priest we found online. Met him twice and was charismatic and charming. Come wedding day he freaks. Yells at me about the pew placement as we are about to line up to go out for the processional. Made me cry and I'm not a crier. He also forgot the custom vows we created together and asked us at the altar as he covered the mic is the assistant and stuff okay. Literally the most important part of the whole day he forgets. SMH. I thought we vetted him enough. I regret not asking for references. Still best day ever. The mass was more for my parents and my so and I were relieved after the ceremony was over. Party was worth every cent.